"We need to make a child," the Apache woman said, and the cowboy went completely still. His horse, sturdy and loyal, picked its way carefully over the uneven ground, and the cowboy's eyes scanned the horizon, alert but tired. He had been traveling alone for days, moving through territories that were unfamiliar and dangerous. He was used to the solitude, but there was a strange tension in the air today, something he could not name. The cowboy had always been a man of few words. Life on the open range had taught him to speak only when necessary. He trusted his instincts, his horse, and the knowledge passed down to him from his father and grandfather. He had faced storms, wild animals, and the occasional trouble from other men, but this journey felt different. It was quieter, yet the silence seemed heavy, almost watching him. As he rounded a bend near a small cluster of trees, he spotted movement ahead. At first he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or a coyote, but then he saw her. She was standing near a stream, her dark hair catching the last light of the sun. She wore a simple dress made from animal hide, but it was clear that it was made carefully, with care and skill. Her posture was strong and steady, as if she belonged to the land itself. The cowboy slowed his horse instinctively, not wanting to startle her. The woman turned her head and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was an unspoken recognition, a silent understanding that two lives had intersected in this vast, empty land. The woman's eyes were sharp, intelligent, and unwavering. There was a presence about her, something that commanded respect without demanding it. The cowboy, who had seen many things in his life, felt a twinge of unease and curiosity all at once. "Hello there," he said finally, his voice rough from travel and wind. His hand rested casually on the saddle, ready but not threatening. The woman tilted her head, studying him. She did not smile, but there was a quiet acknowledgment in her gaze. "You're far from the trail," she said, her voice calm, steady, and firm. There was no fear, no hesitation, only clarity. "I could say the same about you," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. He had learned long ago that politeness could diffuse tension, but words alone were never enough. She took a step closer to the water's edge, her eyes never leaving his. "I have been waiting," she said simply. The cowboy felt a strange shiver run down his spine. There was something in her words that carried weight, though he did not understand it yet. He had traveled through many lands, met many people, but few had spoken with such certainty, as if the world itself had aligned to bring them together. He dismounted slowly, letting the reins fall over his horse's neck. His boots sank slightly into the soft soil, and he moved cautiously, aware of every sound, the rustle of grass, the distant call of a bird, the faint ripple of the stream. He knew that in these lands a single mistake could cost him dearly. "Why have you been waiting?" he asked finally. The woman looked down at the water, then back at him, her expression unreadable. "Because it is time," she said. He frowned, uncertain. "Time for what?" Her gaze sharpened. "Time to make a child." The cowboy froze. For a moment he could not speak. His mind raced, trying to process the words. They hung in the air like a sudden storm, heavy and impossible to ignore. He had heard many things in his life, seen many shocking moments, but nothing had prepared him for this. He could feel his heart quicken, a mix of disbelief, confusion, and an unfamiliar tension building in his chest. The woman took a step closer, her eyes steady, unblinking. "I am not asking, I am telling you," she said. There was no malice, no anger, only certainty. It was clear she had made up her mind long before he had even arrived. The cowboy's mind spun. He had known life was full of challenges, that survival often meant making difficult choices, but this was unlike anything he had faced. He had been ready for danger, for harsh weather, for the occasional confrontation with men who had no regard for life. But this, the directness, the raw honesty of her words, caught him completely off guard. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He could feel the weight of her gaze, and he realized that words would not suffice. This was not about negotiation or argument. It was about something far deeper, something tied to trust, survival, and the continuation of a people. Finally, he found his voice, though it was low and uncertain. "Why me?" The woman's eyes softened slightly, but her expression remained firm. "Because you are here, because you are strong, because you understand the land and respect it. There is a bond that must be honored, and the time has come." He swallowed hard, trying to calm the sudden rush of emotions. Part of him wanted to run, to turn his horse and ride back to the safety of the open plains. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, felt a strange sense of obligation, as if he had been brought here for a reason he could not yet understand. The sun sank lower and the shadows lengthened. The air cooled, carrying the scent of earth, water, and the faint smoke of distant fires. The cowboy felt the enormity of the moment pressing down on him. He had faced life-and-death situations before, but nothing had ever felt like this, the combination of fear, awe, and responsibility. The woman stepped closer to the stream, lifting her hand slightly. "I know this is sudden," she said. "I know it may seem impossible. But there are choices in life that we cannot avoid. This is one of them." The cowboy nodded slowly, his mind still processing. He could feel the tension in his body, the hesitation in his thoughts. Yet beneath it all, there was a strange sense of understanding forming. He realized that this encounter was about more than just two people. It was about legacy, about life, about something far greater than himself. He looked at her for a long moment, studying the lines of her face, the steadiness of her gaze. There was courage there, but also vulnerability. She was asking him to step into a world he had never known, to trust her completely, and to embrace a future that was uncertain. "Give me time," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." She nodded, but her eyes did not waver. "Time is short," she said. "The land waits for no one. Life moves forward whether we are ready or not." The cowboy mounted his horse again, but he did not turn away. Instead, he rode slowly alongside her, keeping his eyes on hers. The weight of her words settled in his chest like a stone. He knew that whatever decision he made, it would change both of their lives forever. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, the cowboy felt the first hints of understanding. Life was not just about survival. It was about connection, about trust, about stepping into the unknown with courage. And as he rode beside the Apache woman, he realized that this journey was only beginning. The night fell, cool and quiet, with stars beginning to twinkle in the vast sky above. The cowboy could hear the gentle rush of the stream, the distant howl of a coyote, and the steady rhythm of his horse's hooves. He was alone with her, yet strangely not alone. Something had begun here, something that neither time nor distance could undo. And deep down, he knew that the choice he faced was not just about him. It was about life, about the future, and about a bond that had already begun to form, one that would test him in ways he could never imagine. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, casting a golden glow across the land. The cowboy stirred on his horse, the events of the previous evening still heavy in his mind. The Apache woman had already begun her day, moving with purpose along the stream. She seemed at home in this land, as if every tree, rock, and ripple of water belonged to her. He watched her quietly, trying to understand her words from last night. "We need to make a child." The phrase echoed again and again in his mind, confusing and yet strangely compelling. He had spent his life wandering the plains, rarely staying in one place for long. His experiences had taught him to be cautious, to weigh risks carefully, and to survive through skill and patience. Yet nothing in his past had prepared him for this moment, nothing that could have explained the weight of her request or the strange pull he felt toward her. She stopped at the water's edge, squatting slightly to examine something in her hands. The cowboy approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. The woman's eyes flicked up briefly, acknowledging his presence, but she did not speak. Her focus was absolute, as if the world around them mattered little compared to the task she was performing. Finally, she stood and turned to him. "You wonder why," she said simply. Her voice was calm but firm. "You think it is sudden, strange, or even wrong." The cowboy nodded. "I do. I can't pretend I understand it." She smiled faintly, a small curve of her lips that held no mockery, only understanding. "Few would, and that is why it is important to explain." She paused, taking a breath, letting the sound of the stream fill the silence. "There are things in our lives that are greater than comfort or fear. There are responsibilities that cannot be ignored. You see this land. You see the life that surrounds us." She gestured toward the hills, the flowing water, and the forest beyond. "It demands respect. And it demands continuation. That is why I must act." The cowboy listened carefully. Her words were not an accusation or a threat. They were a truth she had lived with every day. He had heard of traditions and customs before, but he had rarely met anyone who lived them with such clarity and determination. There was wisdom in her tone, a quiet authority that made it hard to argue or dismiss her. "Why me?" he asked again. The question had been on his mind since last night. "There are others in the world, why not them?" She studied him for a long moment. "Because you are here, because you have proven yourself to understand the land and its people, because you have the strength to face what comes. The choice is not easy, it is never easy, but it is necessary." He shifted in his saddle, feeling the weight of her words press on him. It was not a threat, yet it carried the seriousness of one. He had faced danger many times, storms, wild animals, even men who would have done him harm, but nothing compared to the gravity of what she asked. This was about life, responsibility, and trust, all bound together in a single, life-changing decision. The woman walked a few steps toward a nearby grove of trees, motioning for him to follow. "Come," she said. "You need to see where I come from, where this life begins." He followed cautiously, unsure what to expect. As they moved, she spoke quietly, telling him about her people, their customs, and the importance of family and continuity. She spoke of hardships, of generations who had lived and died in these lands, leaving behind lessons and traditions that demanded respect. The cowboy listened intently, absorbing every word. "The world outside is changing," she said. "New settlers, new ways of life. They do not understand us. They do not understand what it means to survive, to protect, and to continue. That is why it is important for us to act now." He realized that her words were not about him personally. They were about a larger responsibility, a duty she had carried her entire life. And yet, in some strange way, he was now part of that responsibility. The idea both frightened and intrigued him. They arrived at a small clearing where smoke curled from a fire. Nearby, a modest shelter made of wood and hide stood as a testament to resilience and skill. The woman gestured for him to sit. "You need to understand everything before you make a choice," she said. As he settled, she began to tell him stories of her ancestors, stories of courage, of hardship, and of love that had shaped the land and her people. She spoke of warriors who had fought to protect their families, of healers who had nurtured life in the harshest conditions, and of mothers who had carried the future in their hearts. Each story carried a lesson, and each lesson carried weight. The cowboy listened in silence, feeling a connection he had never experienced before. He began to understand that this was not just about a single moment or decision. It was about a legacy, a continuity that reached far beyond his own life. The woman's determination was rooted in something far deeper than personal desire. It was about survival, honor, and respect for life itself. After a while, the woman paused, studying him carefully. "You may not feel ready," she said gently, "and that is natural. But readiness is not always required. Sometimes courage is all that is needed, the courage to step forward, to face uncertainty, and to trust what is greater than yourself." He felt a shiver run down his spine. Her words were not merely advice, they were a challenge, a test of character. He realized that this encounter was forcing him to confront his deepest fears, his assumptions, and his sense of morality. The stream beside them bubbled gently, reflecting the sunlight in sparkling patterns. Birds called from the trees, and the wind rustled the leaves. In the midst of this serene landscape, the weight of the woman's request pressed on him with startling clarity. He understood that whatever decision he made, it would change both their lives forever. "Do you understand why I ask this?" she asked softly. He nodded slowly, though his mind was still a whirlwind of thoughts. "I think I am beginning to," he said, "but it is a lot to take in." She smiled, a quiet and knowing expression. "It is always a lot. Life does not offer simple choices, and yet the decisions we make define us. They shape the future, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us." They sat together in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the forest and the water. The cowboy felt a growing respect for her, not just for her strength, but for her clarity and courage. He realized that this moment was not just about the future of her people or about the continuation of life. It was about trust, understanding, and connection. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I need time to think," he said. "I cannot pretend this is easy for me. But I also cannot ignore what you are saying." She nodded. "Time is short," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "The land does not wait. Life moves forward whether we are ready or not. Think carefully, cowboy, and remember courage is the first step." The cowboy watched her as she moved back toward her shelter, carrying herself with the same quiet strength he had seen since the first moment. He felt a mixture of fear, respect, and a strange curiosity he could not explain. He realized that this encounter would stay with him forever, that it would shape the choices he made from this day forward. As he mounted his horse once more, the sun climbed higher, bathing the land in warm light. The cowboy rode slowly, letting his thoughts settle. He understood that the decision ahead was not simple, not easy, and not free of consequence. Yet, for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of responsibility and the stirrings of something greater than himself. He knew that he could not walk away, not completely. The bond he felt with the Apache woman, the land, and the life she represented was too strong. And though the path ahead was uncertain, he understood that courage and understanding would guide him, just as they had guided those who had come before. The day stretched ahead of him, long and full of possibilities. And as the cowboy rode, he felt a quiet resolve forming in his heart, a resolve to face whatever came next, to learn, to understand, and perhaps to embrace a future he had never imagined. The days passed slowly but meaningfully. The cowboy found himself staying longer than he had planned near the Apache woman's small settlement. Each morning, he woke to the sound of birds singing and the soft rush of the stream. The air was fresh and clean, carrying the scent of earth, water, and the distant wildflowers that dotted the hills. He had traveled through many lands before, but none had made him feel as alive as this place did. The Apache woman moved through her day with steady confidence. She tended to the small garden of herbs and vegetables, gathered water from the stream, and cared for the small animals that lived nearby. Every action seemed purposeful, as if every task she performed was connected to something greater. The cowboy watched her, learning not just how to survive in this land, but also how to respect it. "You move like the wind," he said one morning, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "You seem to belong here completely." She smiled faintly but did not stop her work. "The land teaches us," she said. "It is patient but honest. It rewards respect and punishes carelessness. You can move through it or you can be stopped by it." The cowboy nodded slowly. He had always known that the land demanded respect, but seeing it in action, watching someone live in harmony with it, was different. He realized that her strength was not just in her body, but in her understanding, patience, and ability to listen to the world around her. Over the next few days, he joined her in small tasks. He helped gather firewood, carried water from the stream, and even learned how to track animals in the surrounding woods. At first, he felt clumsy and out of place. The woman would correct him gently but firmly, showing him the proper way to do things without making him feel inferior. He respected her guidance, knowing that every lesson was meant to prepare him, not just for survival, but for life itself. As they worked side by side, the cowboy began to notice small details about her. How her eyes softened when she spoke of her ancestors, how her hands moved with precision and care, and how she laughed quietly at small moments of humor, even when life was hard. He found himself drawn not just to her strength, but to her humanity, her kindness, and her unwavering sense of purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, they sat by the stream together. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the gentle sounds of nature surrounded them. The cowboy felt a sense of peace he had rarely experienced. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "Not just the skills you've taught me, but the way you understand everything around you." She looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. Understanding is not a gift, it is a choice. We can choose to see the world as it is, or we can ignore it and suffer the consequences. I have chosen to see. He nodded, realizing the depth of her words. Life, he thought, was about choices, choices that carried weight far beyond the present moment. And now, standing at the edge of a life-changing decision, he felt the enormity of those choices more clearly than ever. Days turned into weeks, and the cowboy and the Apache woman grew closer. They shared stories of their pasts, their struggles, and their dreams. The cowboy spoke of his travels, the dangers he had faced, and the people he had known. She listened intently, asking questions and offering insights that made him see his experiences in a new light. In return, she told him about her people, their traditions, and the challenges they faced. She spoke of the importance of family, of community, and of leaving a legacy for those who would come after. Through these conversations, the cowboy began to understand not just her perspective, but the reasoning behind her original request. It was not about personal desire alone. It was about duty, survival, and the continuation of a way of life. One afternoon, as they tracked a deer through the forest, the cowboy stumbled and nearly fell into a small ravine. The Apache woman was immediately at his side, her hands steady and sure as she helped him regain his balance. "You must trust the land," she said gently, "and you must trust yourself. Fear will only hold you back." He looked at her, grateful and slightly embarrassed. "I am not used to depending on anyone," he admitted. "I have always done things on my own." She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Even the strongest among us need help. We are not islands. Trust is not weakness, it is strength." That evening, they sat by the fire, the flames flickering and casting shadows across their faces. The cowboy felt a strange mixture of comfort and tension. He had spent so much of his life alone that the closeness he now felt was both unfamiliar and necessary. He realized that his feelings for her were growing, not just out of respect or gratitude, but something deeper, something that was both frightening and exciting. "You have changed me," he said quietly, staring into the fire. "I thought I knew myself, but being here with you, it makes me see things differently." She looked at him, her expression softening. Change is the only constant in life. To grow, we must face new experiences, new people, and new challenges. You are learning, and that is good. Over time, the cowboy began to feel a sense of belonging he had never known. The land, the work, and the Apache woman's presence became a part of his daily life. He began to understand that the decision he faced was not just about a single moment. It was about the life they could build together, about the trust they were forming, and about the connection that had grown between them. One night, as the stars blanketed the sky, they walked together along the stream. The silence was comfortable, filled with the sounds of nature and the quiet rhythm of their steps. The cowboy felt the weight of his thoughts pressing on him, but he also felt a sense of clarity he had not expected. "I am beginning to understand," he said softly. "Not just why you asked, but why it matters. It is not just about us. It is about something greater, isn't it?" She nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, it is about life, trust, and the future. Choices we make today will shape tomorrow, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after. That is why it is important to act with courage and understanding." He took a deep breath, feeling the truth in her words. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were balanced by a growing sense of purpose. He realized that he could no longer see this as merely a decision to make a child. It was a test of character, a measure of trust, and a step toward a life he had never imagined but now could not ignore. As they returned to the shelter, the cowboy felt a quiet determination forming in his heart. He understood that the journey ahead would not be easy, that challenges and doubts would arise, but he also knew that he could face them. He had learned from her strength, her wisdom, and her connection to the land. He had seen the depth of her commitment, and it had inspired him in ways he had never thought possible. That night, as he lay under the stars, he thought of the days to come. He knew that trust and understanding would be the foundation of whatever decision he made. He also knew that the bond between him and the Apache woman had grown stronger, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that some things were bigger than fear or hesitation. The land around him was alive, full of possibility and challenge. And as he drifted into sleep, he felt a sense of readiness growing within him, a readiness to face the unknown, to embrace the lessons of the past, and to step forward with courage, guided by the bond he had formed with the woman who had changed his life forever. The days grew hotter, and the land seemed to stretch endlessly under the bright sun. The cowboy and the Apache woman continued their work and their talks, but now a subtle tension began to appear. The cowboy noticed it first, a shadow of worry in her eyes, a pause in her voice that wasn't there before. He did not know what had caused it at first, but he could sense that something was changing. It happened one morning when they went to gather water from the stream. A faint sound reached their ears, the crunch of boots on dry grass. Both froze instantly. From the trees emerged a small group of men. They were strangers, outsiders, armed and watchful, and their presence immediately set the cowboy's instincts on high alert. The Apache woman's expression hardened, and the cowboy felt a surge of tension. "They are looking for trouble," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her hand moved to the knife at her side, not threatening but ready. The men approached slowly. Their faces were guarded, unsure whether to expect a fight or cooperation. "We are passing through," the leader said, his voice cautious. "We mean no harm." The cowboy studied them carefully. He had faced dangerous men before, but something about their hesitation told him they were not ordinary travelers. He noticed the subtle glances they exchanged, the way their hands hovered near their weapons. He also noticed the slight fear in their eyes when they looked at the woman, realizing she was no ordinary person. The Apache woman stepped forward, her stance calm but firm. "This is my land," she said. "You have no reason to be here. Leave before trouble finds you." The leader hesitated. He was clearly unsure whether to push forward or retreat. The cowboy realized that her presence alone was a barrier, a warning that she would protect this land fiercely. He felt a mix of admiration and relief. She had a way of commanding respect without raising her voice. After a tense moment, the men slowly backed away, disappearing into the trees as silently as they had arrived. The cowboy exhaled deeply, feeling the tension drain from his body. "You handled that well," he said, impressed. She nodded, but her eyes were still serious. "It is never easy. Danger comes when least expected. We must always be ready." The encounter reminded the cowboy that life in these lands was never predictable. Every day carried its risks, and every choice had consequences. He realized that the decision he faced with the Apache woman would not happen in a vacuum. There were forces beyond them: society, outsiders, and even nature itself, that would test their courage and commitment. As the days went on, the cowboy noticed another challenge growing within himself. Doubts began to surface, small at first but persistent. He wondered if he was truly ready for the responsibility she had asked of him. Could he step into a role that demanded trust, courage, and sacrifice? Was he strong enough, not just physically but emotionally, to face the challenges ahead? One evening, while they sat by the fire after a long day of work, he spoke aloud for the first time about his fears. "I do not know if I am ready for this," he admitted. "I respect you, I respect your people, and I respect the land, but it is more than I ever imagined." She listened carefully, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "It is natural to feel doubt," she said gently. "No one steps into life's challenges without hesitation. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to move forward despite it." He looked at her, understanding her words but still feeling the weight of uncertainty. "And what if I fail?" he asked. "What if I cannot meet what is expected of me?" She reached out, placing her hand lightly on his. "Failure is part of life. What matters is that we try, that we do our best, and that we remain true to our choices. Life is not about perfection, it is about perseverance and understanding." The cowboy felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. Her words gave him clarity, but they also reminded him that the path ahead would not be simple. He knew that he must confront not only the dangers around them but also the doubts within himself. Days later, a storm arrived unexpectedly. Dark clouds rolled in across the hills, lightning flashing and thunder roaring as the wind whipped through the trees. The cowboy and the Apache woman worked quickly to secure their shelter, gathering firewood and strengthening the structure against the fierce weather. The storm was relentless, and at times, it seemed as though nature itself was testing their resolve. Through the wind and rain, they worked together seamlessly. The cowboy carried logs, tied down loose hides, and learned how to adapt to the sudden chaos. The Apache woman moved with confidence, her instructions clear and calm, guiding him through every step. Despite the danger, the cowboy felt a growing sense of trust, not just in her abilities, but in himself. He realized that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined, and that their partnership was becoming stronger through adversity. After the storm passed, the land was transformed. The streams had risen, the trees were glistening with rain, and the air smelled fresh and alive. They walked together, surveying the damage and assessing what needed repair. The cowboy felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and the forces of nature, and they had endured together. Yet, even as they celebrated this small victory, another challenge emerged. The cowboy began to feel the emotional weight of the woman's original request more heavily than ever. He realized that the choice to make a child was not just about survival or duty. It was about commitment, intimacy, and trust on a level he had never experienced. The responsibility was immense, and the consequences could affect both their lives forever. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the cowboy voiced his inner conflict. "I respect you and your people," he said slowly. "I trust you, but I am afraid of what this means for us, what it will demand from both of us. I do not want to fail you or bring harm." The Apache woman listened quietly, her expression softening. "Fear is natural," she said. "It shows that you understand the weight of what is at stake, but fear alone cannot guide your choices. Only trust, courage, and honesty can." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He realized that he had a choice, not just about the future of life they could create, but about the bond they were forming and the respect they shared. It was no longer just a question of survival or duty. It was about heart, trust, and the willingness to embrace something greater than himself. In the following days, the cowboy began to open himself more fully to the Apache woman. He shared his fears, his past mistakes, and his hopes for the future. She listened, never judging, always guiding, and always encouraging him to see the strength within himself. Their connection grew deeper, rooted not just in shared experiences but in understanding, respect, and emotional honesty. One afternoon, as they walked through the forest, the cowboy stumbled again, this time over a hidden root. The woman's hand was there instantly, steady and strong, helping him regain balance. He laughed quietly, feeling a warmth that went beyond gratitude. "I am beginning to see," he said. "It is not just about surviving the land, it is about surviving ourselves, our doubts, and our fears." She smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and affection. "Exactly. The land is a teacher, but so is life itself. Every challenge, every doubt, every moment of fear, these shape us, guide us, and prepare us for what is to come." The cowboy felt a sense of readiness growing within him. He knew that challenges would continue, external dangers, emotional tests, and the weight of the responsibility ahead. But he also knew that he could face them with courage and understanding. The bond he shared with the Apache woman had grown too strong to ignore, and he realized that whatever choice he made, it would be made with honesty, respect, and heart. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the land, they sat together quietly. The storm, the outsiders, and the doubts had all tested them, but they had endured. The cowboy felt a quiet pride and a growing certainty. He understood now that true courage was not about strength alone. It was about facing life's uncertainties with trust, compassion, and honesty. The night came, peaceful and full of stars, and the cowboy lay awake thinking of the days ahead. He knew that the path would not be easy, that doubts would return, and that challenges would rise. But he also knew that he was not alone. The Apache woman's wisdom, courage, and trust had shown him a path forward, a path that required not just action, but heart. And in the quiet of the night, he made a silent promise to himself. He would face whatever came next, not with fear, but with courage, respect, and the bond that had grown between him and the woman who had changed his life forever. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting a warm golden light across the land. The cowboy sat quietly outside the shelter, thinking of everything that had happened. The days, weeks, and moments he had shared with the Apache woman weighed heavily on his mind. He had faced danger, storms, doubts, and fears, yet through it all, he had grown in ways he never imagined. Now, the decision he had been avoiding for so long was unavoidable. The Apache woman appeared quietly, walking toward him. Her presence was calm, steady, and strong, as if she carried the land itself within her. She sat beside him without a word, letting the silence stretch between them. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knew that whatever happened next would change their lives forever. "I have thought about everything," he said finally, his voice low and careful. "The danger, the responsibility, the consequences, and I understand now why you asked me. I understand your people, your land, and your life, and I want to try. I want to trust this bond to face the future with you." The Apache woman's eyes softened, a mixture of relief, pride, and something deeper shining in her gaze. "You have grown," she said quietly. "Not just in skill, not just in courage, but in understanding. That is the first step. The rest comes with honesty, patience, and care." The cowboy nodded. He felt a mixture of fear and hope, a strange, powerful combination that made his heart beat faster. He had spent so much of his life alone, wandering through the plains and facing life's challenges on his own. But now, he realized that true strength came from connection, from trust, and from embracing responsibility even when it was difficult. Over the next few days, they prepared together, not just for the physical tasks that lay ahead, but for the emotional journey that was just beginning. They worked in harmony, gathering food, tending to the shelter, and planning for the future. Every action carried meaning, every word was considered, and every glance held unspoken understanding. The cowboy found himself observing her more closely than ever before. He noticed the small ways she cared for the land, how she treated every plant, every animal, and every living being with respect. He began to understand that this care was a reflection of her character, her strength, and her wisdom. And he realized that if he was to walk this path with her, he would need to embody some of that same respect and patience. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, they sat together by the stream. The water flowed gently, reflecting the colors of the sky, and the world felt still around them. The cowboy took her hand, a simple gesture but one filled with meaning. "I am ready," he said softly. "I cannot promise that it will be easy or that I will never falter. But I can promise that I will try with all my strength and all my heart." She looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth and trust. "That is all anyone can ask," she replied. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to move forward despite it. And you have chosen well." As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. They shared quiet moments of laughter, deep conversations, and gentle support for one another. The cowboy learned to listen to her guidance, to observe the land as she did, and to embrace the responsibilities that came with their shared path. The Apache woman, in turn, began to trust him completely, not just for his strength and skills, but for his heart, honesty, and willingness to grow. One day, as they walked through the forest gathering herbs, the cowboy paused and looked around. The land was alive with the sounds of nature, birds singing, leaves rustling, and the faint trickle of water from a distant stream. He realized that this land had changed him. It had taught him patience, respect, and the importance of understanding life beyond oneself. And through it all, the Apache woman had been his guide, his teacher, and his partner. "We have faced much together," he said quietly. "Storms, danger, doubt, and still we have endured, and I believe that we can face whatever comes next." She smiled, the first full smile he had seen in weeks. "Yes," she said, "together we are stronger than we know, and the future we choose to create will be built on trust, respect, and love." As the days passed, they prepared for the life they were about to begin together. They learned more about each other's hopes, fears, and dreams. They worked to ensure that the land and their shelter were ready for the challenges of life, while also creating a space for peace, growth, and connection. Every step they took was deliberate, every choice considered, and every moment shared with care. The cowboy realized that the journey was not just about creating a child, it was about building a life together. It was about trust, patience, understanding, and the willingness to face challenges side by side. He understood that every day would bring new trials, but that their bond would carry them through, stronger than fear or uncertainty. One night, as they sat under the vast expanse of stars, the cowboy spoke softly. "I used to think that life was only about surviving, about facing danger and moving on. But now I see that life is about connection, trust, and the choices we make for those we care about." The Apache woman nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Yes, life is not just about the present moment. It is about the future we create, the love we share, and the bonds we build. And we have the chance to create something meaningful together." The cowboy felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that challenges would continue, that doubts would arise, and that life would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But he also knew that they had the strength, courage, and trust to face whatever came. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly ready. Days later, they finally took the step they had been preparing for. It was not rushed or careless. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and filled with mutual respect. They moved together with a quiet understanding, guided by trust, care, and the deep bond that had grown over time. The moment was not just about creating life. It was about embracing responsibility, love, and connection on a profound level. Afterward, as they rested and watched the sun rise over the hills, the cowboy felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The journey had been long, difficult, and full of doubt, but it had also been full of growth, understanding, and love. He realized that life's greatest challenges often brought the greatest rewards, and that true courage was found in the willingness to trust, to connect, and to embrace the unknown. The Apache woman leaned against him, her presence calm and reassuring. "The future is ours," she said softly. "It will not be easy, but it will be ours to shape, to protect, and to honor." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words and the truth behind them. "Yes," he replied, "together we can face anything. And we will honor the life we create, the bond we share, and the land that has guided us." In the weeks and months that followed, they prepared for the new life that was coming. They continued to work the land, learn from each other, and strengthen their bond. The cowboy had grown in ways he never imagined. He had learned patience, understanding, and the true meaning of trust. And the Apache woman, too, had found a partner who could share in her responsibilities, respect her ways, and embrace the life they were building together. The land around them flourished, mirroring the growth of their relationship. Streams sparkled, trees swayed gently in the wind, and the animals thrived in the care they received. And in the midst of this life, the cowboy and the Apache woman found a deep sense of purpose, connection, and hope for the future. As the sun set on another day, the cowboy reflected on the journey they had taken. From the first moment of shock and uncertainty to the challenges, doubts, and storms they had faced, they had arrived at a place of trust, understanding, and love. He realized that life was not about avoiding difficulty, but about facing it with courage and heart. And as they sat together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the vast sky, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, with strength, respect, and the bond that had grown between them. The journey was far from over, but for the first time he felt truly ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold.